The President's Trophy winners are on the brink. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Vic and Neil with you, and only one game last night. I was so used to using a second screen and going back and forth, and one game, it's almost like I had a little withdrawal.
It was so easy last night. It became like a night off. Just having to watch one game, having to concentrate only on one game was child's play, basically.
Coming out of the regular season when we're watching 11, 12, 13 games in a night, and now you get down to this small schedule. So easy pickings for us as the field starts to thin down. Not quite yet in the second round, but on Tuesday, the Dallas Stars now one game away from the Western Conference Final with a 3-1 win over Winnipeg. Actually, the score was Mikael Granlund 3 and Nikolai Ehlers 1. Nonetheless, Stars now lead the series 3-1. And they also welcome back defenseman Miro Heiskanen. His first game since January 28th. And Peter DeBoer, Stars head coach, elects to play 11 forwards and 7 defensemen to ease Heiskanen back into the lineup. He played 14:52, including 2 minutes and 39 seconds on the power play, and actually got an assist on Granlund's third goal. So even with that little bit of a lineup change, worked out just fine for Dallas.
And Heiskanen was totally responsible for that third goal because it came up to him at the top of the key, and he looked away and then threw it quickly to Granlund, who was on the right side, and he one-timed it. No goalie in the world would have stopped that shot, but it was all because of Heiskanen's look-away pass.
Start of the game, I thought Winnipeg started well. Jake Ottinger with a key save very early on Gabe Vilardi. And then the first of the goals by Granlund was on the power play off a rush, a single-man rush. He received a pass about 25 feet back in his own end from Thomas Harley. Came in, Neil Pionk kind of backed up, and he beat Connor Hellebuck low glove from between the top of the circles. So I think just from all respects, the way this was defended, from how it was handled by the Jets penalty killing unit to Hellebuck not making that save, not good.
The first mistake was Tanev went at him, and he poked the puck by Tanev and jumped around him, and then had all this momentum going at the defenseman. So, I mean, that first forward that challenges him in the neutral zone and doesn't even make him pass the puck, doesn't make him do anything other than jump around and keep going with the same head of steam. It was a tough one. Having said that, this is the one goal in that game that Hellebuck should have had, and he didn't have. And it was a devastating goal because it made Dallas take the lead 1-0, which was what the Winnipeg Jets should have wanted to do. I'm sure they wanted to get the first goal and get the lead. They would have played more comfortably that way. But instead, they had to play from behind right off the bat. They had to play from behind.
Goal scored at 8:36, and the period ended 1-0. But early in the second, Jake Ottinger was near perfect. But the one goal he did give up, sharp angle, shot by Nikolai Ehlers at the 1:02 mark of the second period. And I thought just overall, the Jets actually had the better of the play in the second. And maybe this has been their best road effort in the playoffs thus far, even though they are showing an 0-5 record.
Yeah, Ehlers' goal, Ottinger should have had that one, but I think that what Ottinger did on that was he stutter-stepped a little bit because there was a guy in front. You're not sure where the puck's going to go, and on a bad angle like that, you're thinking he's probably not going to shoot to between my legs, and he did. And Ehlers was able to catch the 5-hole on Ottinger, but that was the only misstep Ottinger had in this game. He was terrific for Dallas.
Turning point came late in the second with about 3:05 left when Ottinger made a left pad save on Kyle Connor, who was all alone in front. And then less than a minute later, Granlund gets a second of the game, high glove off a 2-on-1.
Yeah, and as I said, just terrific saves by Ottinger, including that left pad save on Kyle Connor. And then, as you said, they turn right around and Granlund gets his second goal and second Dallas goal, a 2-on-1 high glove, a place where pucks have been shot by all the opponents in this playoffs on Connor Hellebuck, and seems to be successful many times. And so this again was another devastating dart to go in on the Jets.
Particularly because Winnipeg had a 20-13 edge in shots. I thought American Airlines Center was pretty quiet. And that's a relatively raucous building. Shot attempts were 44-27 through the second period. And again, we don't ever want to make too much of that stat. But for a team that has struggled on the road, Winnipeg had this game in a really good spot. And to give up a goal that late in the period had to be somewhat devastating for them. Again, having to play from behind going into the third period.
And, you get to the point collectively where you're going like, damn, there's nothing we can do right. Like, what the hell? When are we going to catch a break? We're not catching any breaks. Like, and it can get into your head. And I think that's what happened with the Jets. It gets into your head that, we're just not catching any breaks. Here's another road game that we're down again.
So early in the third period, Hayden Fleury takes a high-sticking double minor penalty against Rupe Hintz. But the best chance comes on a breakaway by Kyle Connor while they're shorthanded. And again, it's Ottinger making the big stop.
Kyle Connor played almost 25 minutes last night. Think about that. Almost half the entire game as a forward. He played 24-56. Tremendous player for the Winnipeg Jets. And Ottinger made a stupendous save on that shorthanded breakaway in the early third. Connor's got tons of speed, great sniper, and Ottinger was equal to the task. And that was a huge save in the third period for the Dallas Stars.
Because with just 3 seconds left on that double minor power play, that third goal, that shot by Granlund, it was sharp angle, but it was an exquisite shot. And as you said, there was no goalie that was stopping that, having to go side to side. That was right under the crossbar. Absolutely terrific shot.
And think about it. You're in your own building. The crowd is going crazy. You've got a power play, and Granlund gets a terrific goal, and it's his third goal of the game, and the hats are coming onto the ice, and the place is going crazy. It just put a completely huge railroad tie nail into the Winnipeg Jets when that one went in.
Pretty far cry for Granlund, who started this season in San Jose and now to be on the verge of making the conference final. And this just speaks to the depth that the Dallas Stars have now. I mean, we barely mentioned Mikko Rantanen and Wyatt Johnston and Matt Duchene and Tyler Seguin and all the other players that have somewhat of a star quality for the Dallas Stars. And we spoke about this last night on the phone, and I asked you, is the spot where maybe Winnipeg, being a small market team and having perhaps more trouble attracting free agents, this is a real good team, Winnipeg. But when you get deeper into the playoffs, sometimes your depth gets exposed, and there's not quite that offense there for them to keep up with the star quality of Dallas. You agree with that?
I do, and I want to make mention of one other thing. I want to say how you and I talked about pre-deadline, how smart it was of Jim Nill to go in and strike first and go to San Jose and get two pieces that were really good pieces in Michael Granlund and Cody Ceci and bring them in at that point. Go get them, put them on the team, know what you wanted, and now you got that. Now, That is not the Rantanen deal. Obviously, the Rantanen thing is the best thing that you could do because of the way he's played. But I always liked, you remember this, I loved that move that he made to get Granlund and Ceci away from San Jose and put them in there. Michael Granlund is not Mikko Rantanen, and Cody Ceci is not Heiskanen. But they're important depth pieces that you needed. And here you've got Granlund, a depth guy, like he's not a fourth liner, but I mean he's a really good piece. He ends up winning an important playoff game for you single-handedly. The other guy that he traded for, Rantanen, has won how many playoff games for them now? So, I mean, just think about it. A couple months ago, they didn't have either one of these guys. Now they're in the playoffs, and two guys that they just acquired in the last couple of months are leading their team.
And this is something that Winnipeg obviously hasn't done to that level.
No, Winnipeg went out and made their moves. They did some good things. I mean, they got Tanev, that we said, from Seattle, who's a depth guy, let's say third, fourth line, good checker, penalty killer, and stuff like that. But they're not in the Mikko Rantanen race. You could say, to your point, when you're Winnipeg, Manitoba, and a Mikko Rantanen, one of the premier players in the league, who's going to be a free agent, becomes available, you're out of it. You're out of it. He's not going to Winnipeg.
Right.
Is he going to Dallas? Yeah, it's a great city. It's got no state income tax. They're a contender. I mean, how do you compete with that? That's one thing that's really hard to compete with in this league. I mean, and it's not just because it's Winnipeg, Manitoba, my mother's hometown, by the way. It's also Buffalo. It was Carolina. Rantanen didn't want to be in Raleigh, North Carolina. So this is where there's a decided edge for some teams over others in player personnel. You can get the Rantanens where other teams can't get them. And even the great Edmonton Oilers can't attract a Rantanen. They can draft Rantanen, they can draft McDavid, they can draft Draisaitl, they can draft all these other stars, and that's what they've done. But when it comes to free agency or trying to recruit a player to come on his own, very tough for some markets to be able to do that.
So the Jets head home, down 3-1. And it's becoming increasingly clear that even though Hellebuck has certainly played better in this series than he did during the opening round against St. Louis, the guy at the other end is going toe-to-toe and even exceeding Hellebuck by a considerable margin. So this guy's got to be great for 3 games now, or the Jets are going home.
And considering that they haven't won a road game since 2023, the Winnipeg Jets.
In the postseason.
Yes, obviously in the playoffs.
Yes.
That's what I mean, a playoff road game. It's tough to imagine that they're going to be able to win 3 straight games now to come back on the Dallas Stars when one of them is in Dallas. We'll wait. Never say never, because it's all possible, and we'll be hanging, watching the TV, but it's extremely unlikely.
Break out all the cliches.
The only way that Winnipeg will win this series is if I bet that they won't.
Some problem with the betting slip, sir?
I can assure you they will win 3 straight games if I bet on Dallas.
Well, I guess we'll find out if you ever put that to the test. Let's head over to the Wednesday night games, a pair on ESPN. At 7 o'clock, Florida and Toronto will play their 5th game with the series tied at 2 apiece. A little bit of news coming out of Maple Leafs camp. Anthony Stolarz skated before Tuesday's practice. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's imminent to return, but he is back on the ice. But I believe the reality here is this is Joseph Woll's series, at least for the next 2 games.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. This round is going to be Joseph Woll. And if they can get past Florida, and Stolarz then is healthy. And did I say healthy twice? Is happy
You
and
did.
healthy. If he's happy and healthy, he could be in the next round. But for now, Joseph Woll is going to be the man who ultimately either gets them into the next round or gets them out onto the golf course.
We had spoken about the extra day off in between games. You said it was more beneficial for the Panthers because of their health and wanting to get guys a little bit more healed up. I believe that it was more from the Toronto reset and that they were coming off the 2 losses and that the extra day would help them. I think there's truth in both of those. And it will be interesting to see who actually comes out more forceful in Game 5, because the Panthers certainly established that and played it to a T in Game 4 to even this series. And how does Toronto counter that, knowing that this is what Florida is going to bring to them for 2 and maybe 3 games for the remainder of the series?
Yeah, no, you're right on. And look, I'd be surprised if Toronto couldn't win a game. I think it's going to go 7 because Toronto is going to win a game. I still say Florida is going to win the series, but Toronto is going to win a game, and that forces it into 7, right? If we say that Florida is going to win, but Toronto will win a game, because there's only 3 left, and it's now a 2 out of 3. But the momentum is all with Florida, having won the last 2. If you're going to go into a best 2 of 3, you want to go in having won your last 2 games.
I'm going to say what I said during the St. Louis-Winnipeg series, that it was going to be a homer series because I did not believe that the Jets could go into St. Louis and win. And I'm going to say the same thing here. I think that Florida can lose this game tonight and win the series. I don't think the Leafs can and go down to Florida to bring this back for a Game 7. I think this is more pivotal for Toronto.
Agreed. I totally agree.
Well, if we agree, then we have to move on.
Yeah. We need a good argument out of that.
No, we have a good argument.
No, you're right. I mean, when you're right, you're right. It's more important that Toronto win tonight than Florida. They've lost 3 straight. Toronto wins tonight. They've got life pumped back into them again, but they're going down to Florida, and that alone will put life in Florida. So you're bang on. They have to win this game.
You don't like when I'm bang on. I think that's the problem.
No, I don't. I like when you're wrong.
Well, maybe I am.
Which is hardly ever.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I should be doing your picking for you then.
You should be doing my betting for me with your money instead of mine.
Yes, very true. Well, perhaps there's something to be said about this Edmonton-Vegas game, which will be coming up at 9:30. Some news out of the Edmonton camp that if the Oilers advance, defenseman Mattias Ekholm could return for the Western Final, but they have one more game before they get there, or one more win that they need. But I think that what we saw out of the Oilers, particularly in Game 4, it is going to be really difficult for the Golden Knights to run off 3 straight wins. Even though the Golden Knights won the Cup 2 years ago, there's the motivation piece, there's the lessons that Edmonton learned from last year that I believe are really being used to their advantage this time around.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Vegas will win tonight.
They might. That's why they play.
No, I know, but I'm going to predict something, and I'm making the bold statement. This is bold.
Go ahead.
Vegas is going to win tonight.
Who are you betting on?
I don't bet, sir.
I believe that Vegas needs to essentially do what the Oilers did to them in Game 4 and get pucks in deep on this Edmonton defense, bang them hard, force them to play in their own end. And of course, all this is easier said than done. When you have the speed, when you have the offensive gifts that the Oilers have and their ability that they've shown with their depth scoring now to get offense from the Evander Kanes, from the Adam Henriques. Corey Perry has been terrific in these playoffs. So even though the game plan is pretty obvious, I believe, for the Golden Knights, the Oilers are going to have something to say about that.
So let's put our cards on the table here. I'm going to say here's the two winners of the Wednesday night games, Toronto and Vegas. That's so that tomorrow you can poke fun at me. I'm saying Toronto and Vegas will win these games. Who do you say?
I'm going to say Toronto and Edmonton.
Okay.
I think the Oilers want to get this series done. I think they want the rest. And as we've said, you don't want to have to play any more Stanley Cup hockey than is necessary. And I believe
the problem with them wanting the rest is that Vegas actually wants to win the game. That's going to be the problem.
Well, they both want to win the game.
I know. And what I'm saying is what Chico Resch said to us. You know why you don't win every game? Because the other guy wants to win too.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. No, I'm just having fun. I agree. Yeah, Edmonton's going to want to end it tonight to get the rest, to get going. But I still say that the winners tonight will be the two home teams.
It's a matter of survival for Vegas and a matter of getting rest for Edmonton. So we will see what happens in that one. And the Carolina-Washington series will resume in the nation's capital Thursday at 7 o'clock. The Hurricanes lead that series 3-1. In some news, the compensation thresholds for offer sheets have been released, and it ranges from compensation of nothing for average annual values of $1.54 million or less to 4 first-round picks for an offer sheet starting at $11.7 million. Tom Fitzgerald, who we had on the show earlier in the season, suggested that there are going to be more offer sheets out there. And with the increased salary cap, which will continue to go up substantially over the next 3 years, do you see more offer sheets coming the way the Blues did when they took Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg from the Oilers last year?
I think there'll be more, but there won't be a plethora. I don't think that it's going to start to be an everyday thing. I've been in this league a long time, and boy, when you do something that the other teams don't like, you get crap for doing it. Like you hear about it from everybody. Like, why are you doing that? All you're doing is ruining the salary structure, so on and so forth. So I think you'll see them do it, but I don't think you'll see many people do it. And when you do it, you'll have to justify what you're doing. 4 first-round picks, too, is I don't see that happening. I still think there's a lot of pressure within the league, within the hockey guys, not to screw each other.
Well, there's a handful of high-end RFAs out there. Evan Bouchard of the Oilers, Matthew Nyes of the Maple Leafs, J.J. Peterka of Buffalo, Gabe Vilardi of Winnipeg, and Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. And just to put a few more numbers out there for folks, the cap goes up from $88 million this year to $95.5 next year. That jumps up to $104 million in 26-27 and $113.5 in 27-28. And as we look at cap space that's out there projected by SportTrack, it ranges from $6.7 million for Tampa Bay to over $43.3 million for the San Jose Sharks. So with the increase in salary cap, you certainly are going to have an interesting summer. It's like, I can't wait to do the summer coolers. And we're not even done with the second round yet.
It's going to be interesting to see how these teams handle this extra money. And by the way, just so that everybody understands, just because the salary cap goes to 95.5 doesn't mean that all the teams spend 95.5. There's still a lot of teams where the owner goes, wait a minute, I'm only bringing in 60 million. I'm not spending 80. It's just bad math. So while there will be teams that will spend up to the cap, there will be a lot of teams that won't be able to spend up to the cap simply for budget reasons.
And they will spend more to the floor, which I believe is going to be around 70 million.
Right. And they will take on, dead money to get to the floor. Dead money means a guy who's on long-term IR, who's not coming back, like the former captain of the Nashville Predators and Montreal Canadiens,
Shea
Weber, who's still getting paid but couldn't resume his career. I don't know which team he's with now officially, but he's getting paid by somebody who got draft picks to take that.
And your insight on this is, as a former GM, for all these teams out there looking for somebody to join their organization, hire this man.
Yeah. You need your floors swept or anything else, I'm your guy.
All right. Neil, you know what time it is.
Time to go to the dentist?
No, it's not time to go to the dentist.
It's this day in Stanley Cup history, May 14th.
And here we go with the Carolina Hurricanes on the verge of moving on to the conference finals. In 2009, Scott Walker scored in 1846 of overtime to lead the Hurricanes over the Bruins in Game 7 of the Eastern semis. They were then swept by the eventual Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins in the East Final. And speaking of the Penguins, in 1993, this is our featured item here, David Volek, in the 7th game of the Patrick Division Finals, scores an overtime goal to defeat the Penguins, who were going for 3 consecutive Stanley Cups. The Penguins entered the playoffs in 93 on a 17-0-1 run. They scored 10 goals twice in that streak, 9 goals once, 7 goals twice, and 6 goals 3 times. I thought this club was actually better than the 2 Stanley Cup winning teams in 91 and 92.
Oh, by far. This team won the President's Trophy and was the best Pittsburgh Penguins team I've ever seen. This was a tremendous team. They should have won their 3rd Stanley Cup in a walk. And yet, stuff happens.
The Islanders played such a fearless series. And Darius Kasparaitis was right at the front of that. And he knocked down Mario Lemieux a few times. I remember once he actually barked at him while Lemieux was down on the ice. And the Islanders relished that underdog role. They led this game 3-1 in the 3rd period. Goals by Ron Francis and Rick Tocchet in the final 4 minutes tied the game. But then Volek converted a pass from Ray Ferraro at 5:16 of overtime to win this game and ruin the dynasty title for the Penguins. And this game was also remembered for the violent collision between Rich Pilon of the Islanders and Kevin Stevens of the Penguins. And Stevens landed face first on the ice, and that was a career-changing moment for the Pittsburgh forward.
Oh, it definitely was. And I had Kevin Stevens after that and had Rich Pilon at the same time, both on the Rangers a number of years later. And I got a chance to speak to Rich Pilon this winter at UBS Arena about that, about playing with Kevin. And Rich said Kevin was so good to him on the team. He said he welcomed him there and never was a problem, that it was just a hockey play gone wrong, as my friend often says.
And I had read somewhere that you had actually approached Stevens to see how he would feel about you acquiring Pilon, because evidently those two players had some history going back prior in their careers.
Yeah, and that's the way I managed. I just didn't think it would be right to bring a guy in who'd really negatively impacted another player's career and just say, too bad, you just got to put up with this. I wanted to see if there would be a problem in the locker room. Kevin Stevens was an extremely popular guy every team he played on, and the last thing you wanted to do was not give him the courtesy of that conversation.
One of my favorite parts about doing these history bits is it's not only the game, it's the backstories that are in there. And I certainly hope that our listeners get as much out of this as we enjoy telling these stories.
Absolutely. And they're great stories. And I want to tell you that the New York Islander 1993 team, which we swept in the first round of 1994, badly swept them. That was Don Maloney as the general manager of that team.
Yeah.
And Al Arbor, I believe, was the coach of that team.
He was.
I remember it very well. And the reason I remember it so well is because I had to watch everything on TV because we missed the playoffs that year. And I was pissed. And now to stick a knife in my eye, the hated Islanders go and win the first round and win against Pittsburgh. And there's a chance they can beat Montreal in the next round. And they didn't, but there was a chance. Montreal, of course, went on to win the Stanley Cup that year.
Well, there was all that overtime magic in Montreal, too. And you did get your revenge the next year in that 4-game sweep, outscoring the Islanders 22-3.
Yes, and John LeClair, made famous by the overtimes of that playoff run by the Montreal Canadiens.
Oh, particularly in the final where he had the OT winners in games number 3 and 4 for the Canadiens against the Los Angeles Kings.
One of the worst trades of Serge Savard's general managership was, I don't even think that's a word, but was the trading of John LeClair. John LeClair went to Philadelphia. A lot of people don't even remember that he was in Montreal, but he got traded to Philadelphia, where he went on to do histrionics on a line affectionately called the Legion of Doom with none other than Eric Lindros.
And Michael Renberg.
But Michael Renberg was the least of the doom of having to play against LeClair and Lindros.
How did we get to this place?
I don't know. Let's move on.
All right. That'll wrap up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe and like us on Facebook. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. Neil and I look forward to speaking with you again on Thursday to recap the 2 games on Wednesday and then look ahead to Thursday's action. Neil, you got something?
Yeah, we look forward to making fun of each other on our predictions of what's going to happen tonight. Remember, I said both home teams would win, Toronto and Vegas. And you, my friend, said that Toronto would win, but Edmonton will win on the road and eliminate the Vegas Golden Knights tonight. And you know what they say? Once a king, always a king, but once a knight's enough.
I think we'll leave it at that. We'll speak to you Thursday.